Nikkei Asia News Roundup
with Jada and Brian. Welcome to the Nikkei Asia News Roundup with your hosts Jada and Brian.
bringing you the latest updates and insights on the dynamic world of Asia and more.
So this week we are changing things up a bit.
Yes, we will share some of Nikkei Asia's most popular stories, so stay tuned.
Now let's delve into the headlines. This program is brought to you by Nikkei.
The U.S. government is restricting anyone, anywhere in the world from using Huawei's AI chips, an unprecedented crackdown on the Chinese tech giant despite a recent de-escalation of the tariff war between Washington and Beijing.
Japan's Nissan Motor will cut 7 of its 17 factories under its new CEO's sweeping restructuring strategy, aimed at turning the loss-making company around.
Indonesia's shark trade is growing due to high export demand, especially for fins, but overfishing is shrinking supply. Despite regulations, local fishermen in Tanjung Luar on Lombok Island rely on shark hunting to make a living.
Companies are reining in plans to list in Asia, experts say, as sweeping U.S. tariffs and the festering global trade war sap investor appetite for initial public offerings.
6 weeks after Myanmar's military-built capital, Naypyidaw, was devastated by a 7.7 magnitude earthquake, the largest of many in the past century, a question mark hangs over the city. Is it worth reconstructing?
Australia's main political opposition, the Liberal Party, selected Susan Ley on Tuesday as the first female leader in the party's 80-year history, as it faces the challenge of rebuilding after suffering a rout in the recent federal election. Now moving on to the next segment.
Kyoto Tea Farmers take global thirst for matcha in stride. International demand for matcha has never been higher, stoked by social media influencers posting about the reputed health benefits of drinking the photogenic Japanese green tea. Exports of green tea from Japan last year were 10 times as much as were shipped abroad 2 decades earlier. Powdered tea, primarily matcha, made up 58% of that total, according to Japan Tea Export Promotion Council figures. Yet many farmers around Kyoto Prefecture, the traditional center of Japanese matcha production, are indifferent to the buzz. Scaling up their output of leaves and powder would involve committing considerable resources, time, and manpower to the uncertain prospect that international demand for matcha is more than just a fad. Most of the region's tea farmers are over 65 and lack the savings needed to finance major expansions of capacity. Despite the matcha rush, prices of tencha, the dried leaves that are ground up to make matcha, are lower than they were in 2012, although they have been on the rebound since bottoming at 2,168 yen, or $15, a kilogram in 2020. The long-term decline in prices, as well as falling domestic consumption, have contributed to sagging green tea production levels in Japan. Output last year was 27% below the level reached in 2004, and domestic consumption was down 39.5% from that time in 2023.
Taiwans Lie urges nonred supply chain to counter unfair China trade. U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff policy has turned up the heat on governments around the world, and Taiwan is no exception. Yet for Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te, there is a fundamental question of values, and the answer is to focus on building a supply chain for democracies. Over the past few decades, the free economy headed by the Western world and led by the United States has brought economic prosperity and political stability to Taiwan and elsewhere, Lai told Nikkei's editor-in-chief in his first foreign media interview of the year. But he said not all countries have been exemplary students of the system. The biggest crisis right now is China, which exploits the free trade system to engage in plagiarism and counterfeiting, infringe on intellectual property rights, and even provide massive government subsidies that facilitate the dumping of low-priced goods worldwide, he said. If this kind of unfair trade is not resolved, the stable societies and economic prosperity we have painstakingly built over decades, as well as some of the values we pursue, could be destroyed. I therefore think it is worthwhile for us to observe the recent willingness of the U.S. to address unfair trade, and if necessary, offer assistance. Lie said his administration therefore hopes to leverage Taiwan's advantages in production and manufacturing to connect the democratic community and establish a global non-red supply chain for semiconductors, excluding China.
And now for news highlights. Today, we are sharing a couple of Nikkei Asia's most well-read stories in the last few days.
Yes, so we looked at the last week or so, and looking at the top 10 stories that Nikkei Asia drew readers, we have a lot of actually Philippine election stories, and also India-Pakistan conflict is another major theme, it looks like.
The India-Pakistan one makes a lot of sense because it's a very quickly developing story.
Yes.
And there's a lot of articles that go along with it.
Yeah. I mean, the developments were it accelerated pretty quickly.
And it's become, not to get away from the tragedy of it all, but it is developing like an action film in certain ways.
Yeah.
So there are, and there's the diplomacy, and then there's the geopolitical implications. So it's a constantly updating story, and several of our stories made the top 10 about it.
Yes, and it involved, so one of the headlines for the story is that Pakistan says it downed 5 Indian aircraft, stresses right to avenge. And then another one was the Chinese-made jet bringing down Indian fighters in Pakistan. So a lot of aircraft stories was, I guess, an interesting angle for our readers. And then the Philippine election is also something that's happened fairly recently, and we can call that another surprise, I guess, in the geopolitical world.
Yeah, the Philippine election. There was also the elections in Singapore a week or two ago.
Yes.
But that actually resulted in a turnout and results that were pretty much expected.
Yes.
For the most part. The Philippine election one, though, had some surprises. One of the ones I found interesting is that Rodrigo Duterte, the former president, he's currently at The Hague awaiting trial.
Yes.
But he won election as mayor of Davao, and there's a question there of because he's technically not convicted or on trial yet, so he could run.
Yeah.
So there's a question of what that means.
And this is all relating to his war on drugs.
Yes.
Yeah.
During his presidency and before that.
And it could actually also affect Duterte's daughter, Sarah Duterte, who is the vice president.
And who is facing, I believe, an impeachment trial?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that there was the question of how this election could influence that. And right now it looks like people that support her won or did well in this election.
Yeah.
So that could tip in her favor.
So the current president, Marcos Jr., he will face a big challenge in this political family feud between the Marcos and Dutertes, it seems like.
Yeah, because the president of the Philippines is limited to one term. And he's nearing about halfway through his 6-year term.
Yeah.
So there is the question of whether the remaining years of his term could be a bit of a lame duck presidency.
Yeah. And another topic, I should say, a major theme, again, is, Trump tariffs. We actually had a story, the headline reads, "Is a U.S.-China trade war truce imminent? 5 things to know." So this was an explainer and that we had a couple days back. But now that we've seen that an actual sort of limited trade steel tariff cuts have
there's
happened.
been stuff that's been resolved, but a lot of stuff that's still unresolved, and it's an ever-evolving situation. And one of the stories made it in there, but there's so many stories every day coming out related to all this. So they're constantly popping up in the top 10.
Yeah, I'm sure. So China and the U.S. have agreed for a 90-day pause or tariff cut. So I'm sure in these 90 days, a lot of new developments will happen, and we'll be following that closely as well. There's some fun headlines in here as well, though. You were pointing one out earlier.
Yeah. Should I read the headline or you?
Yes, go ahead.
The headline says, "A plant that can mine nickel. Malaysia sets 2026 harvest date." And that should give you a hint there that when they say plant, they don't mean factory. They mean the biological thing that can mine nickel, and it makes you wonder how exactly does that work? And that was enough to get people to click on that.
And that brings us to the close of today's episode.
We look forward to having you join up again for the next edition of the Nikkei Asia News Roundup.
Stay informed, stay curious. Until next time, I'm Jada.
And I'm Brian. See you again, and take care. This program is brought to you by Nikkei.